Hello, friends. Welcome to Monk Chat. I'm here tonight with three other venerables. So to my left, I assume Bhante Sudaso already by now. To my right, Bhante Sumita, who you should also know by now, since he's been kindly giving many teachings here at Empty Cloud Monastery. Thank you, Bhante. And to Bhante Sumita's right, Ajahn Kavilo, Bhante Sudaso's Dharma brother. They started their monastic life somewhat together, I think 1 year apart. You're the older brother?
Yeah, 1 year.
You're apart, great. So tonight we'll all be here for Monk Chat, and you're all welcome to ask any questions you have about the Dhamma and type them in, or if you're live here at Empty Cloud Monastery, you're also welcome to raise your hand and ask questions. You can also pick the monastic you'd like to ask the question with, but we might not pick that, give that the question to the monastic you pick. But that is an option. And hello, welcome to Aaron, Rick, Roy, Poonam, Kumu, and everyone else who's watching. So whenever you are ready, feel free to type in a question. Hello, Lucas as well. So we have Rick, who is asking a question. Frequently I question how hard to push myself. Venerables, how do we skillfully apply wise effort in meditation and daily life practice when we have life-altering chronic illness and pain? Anyone want to volunteer to answer this question? Bhante Sumita?
I think getting sick is an integral part of our life. We can get rid of this thing. This can come to us anytime. And most important thing is when we get sick, we see the picture of death. So then we fear, we are scared to death. We don't want to die. So we actually, because of this fear, because of this thing, we panic. And even if you have a little bit of cough or sneeze in these days in particular, everyone is scared. Even the people around feel scared, and they already think of COVID and already think of getting cremated without anyone's attendance. So they feel already a lot of fear and phobia. So getting sickness is also a kind of a blessing in disguise. This is how you feel when you go to the next level. That is the final sickness, when you are dying. So I think the most important thing is not to panic when you are sick, whether it is chronic illness or otherwise. If you panic, then things can be pretty fast aggravating. But if you calm down yourself, and it is way easier for you to cope up with these situations. Even though it's a small sickness or last longing sickness that you're suffering from, try not to panic. Especially when you are physically sick, I recommend you also listen to more chantings. Chantings can be very helpful in healing you. And there are particular chantings, like the Buddha was sick sometimes, and then Venerable Mahachunda came to him, and Buddha asked him to chant the Sattabhajanga Dhamma. So Mahachunda Therabhajanga records about that. When Venerable Mahakassapa was sick, Buddha himself went there, and then he chanted Sattabhajanga Dhamma, 7 factors of enlightenment, and he felt better. And then Venerable Mahamoggallana was sick. The Buddha went there, and he also chanted the Sattabhajanga Dhamma, and he felt way better. And it happened to many people when they were sick. So Ratana Sutta was chanted when there was three kinds of difficulties happening to city of Vesali, and there the Buddha advised Venerable Ananda and the other monks to go around the city chanting with loving kindness for the benefit of all these things. And so the Ratana Sutta also is a famous chanting these days, especially with the world suffering from COVID-19. So there are quite a few suttas actually we can use for chanting, and also practice loving kindness to yourself and to others, and not to panic. Stay calm will be very helpful, and accept, because sickness is part of your life. You can get rid of it. When you get it, just accept it. I think when you accept it, it's easier for you to cope up with that situation.
Thank you so much, Bhante. And Don Justice asks, how do we handle protesting when others can be very violent with speech and possibly body? It's very hard. I observe my feelings, create space. It's difficult. But sometimes being compassionate and willing to support other groups seeks to have good effects. But it also feels I'm harming the others who are against what we're standing up for. Ajahn Kavya?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, there's, in my experience, it's common in America, there's like a disjunct between people who are, leading lives as activists versus, people who've entered into like Dharma circles or Dharma practice. And that was definitely the case with myself, very, into doing different activist related things. And and then coming to the Dhamma, and there wasn't much of like an in-between zone of like, Dhammic protest or protesting in a way which, is there a way with which the Buddha would have praised protest? It's a great question, a great internal question, which there are suttas. There's a discourse which the Buddha gave on nodding, specifically on, when Mahamoggallana was, before he had attained enlightenment, he was nodding in a cave, and the Buddha gave him specific advice. And one piece of advice was, Mahamoggallana, don't utter any speech which is contentious. Yeah, so that's a really high standard. The Buddha was giving it to someone who was on the brink of arahantship, practicing in a cave. Would the Buddha have given that same advice to all of us or any of us at any particular time? It's hard to say. The Buddha did give clear advice for speech. One of those in relation to this is, the Buddha suggested not speaking harsh speech. And we'll be giving a talk on this, I think later this week, about the specific. There are 6 or 7 different adjectives which the Buddha uses to describe and elaborate and describe what is harsh speech and what is its opposite. And for the most part, we don't want to be speaking in a way which is harmful to others. But the question still remains, what do you do? Like, especially in America, there's a strong history, a strong tradition of activism and speaking truth to power. In Thailand or in other traditional Buddhist countries, there is a delineation between kind of the job of monks and the job of lay people, and it's kind of seen as improper for monastics to engage in protests. But in America, this monasticism thing is a whole new new venture to some extent, only within the last 100 years or so. So this is all kind of dancing around the fundamental aspect that I don't really have a good answer. Just you kind of have to look at and see, how do the principles of right speech apply to how you are engaging in your protesting, and really looking at your own mind as you do it, as you're protesting, as you're speaking. Is anyone actually able to hear your words? Are your words actually effective? Are your words harmful? Are they effective? Are they not effective? Are they not harmful? To what extent are they harmful? It's just an investigation. So maybe someone else has some more specific and actual advice rather than.
Thank you, Ajahn Kavio. That was really useful. Perhaps I will add to that it can be very easy sometimes to kind of create a story in our minds of who are the people that hold views different than ours, or behave in unskillful ways, especially if we start studying a lot of books on the subject matter. So then we don't relate to people anymore, but we relate to the ideas of the people that we have in our minds. So what the Buddha suggests, actually, that whenever we're having, for example, quote unquote debate, so when we're encountering people with opposite views from ours, instead of going to the debate, so to speak, with the idea, I'm going to prove them wrong, I'm going to wait for them to make a mistake, so I'll shame them that they haven't done their research properly. So looking for faults and looking for a way to kind of demean the adversary, instead of going there with a mind of perhaps they're right, perhaps they have something to say, perhaps they have something to share. And really deep listening, so opening up, listening to the points of views that they have, with the intention of perhaps I will be the one changing my mind, rather than looking for fault. And that kind of creates an opening where we're really actually perhaps understanding where people are coming from. Another thing that I found very useful, whenever put in a situation where there were perhaps things that I felt people were having, nurturing some really harmful thoughts. And I was like, how is it possible that, all these people are crazy? Perhaps half of the United States is insane. That's like 150 million people, I was like, wow, it's crazy. So maybe instead immersing myself for a period of time in all the literature, all the information, all the news that these groups of people were reading. And then noticing how my mind was starting to adopt the same thoughts, adopt the same worldviews, and going, okay, so this is how one can start seeing the world in this way. And I felt personally that is actually an experiential understanding of dependent origination. So dependent origination of thoughts in, the people that don't have the thoughts that we share, and also in the thoughts that we nurture. So where are our thoughts coming from? It's not that ours are necessarily right 100%. Hopefully they're wholesome if we're practicing the Dhamma. But also if we're practicing the Dhamma, they're wholesome because they're dependently arisen from our practice of Dhamma. So always instead of sticking to our views, only this is true, everything else is wrong, rather going to it in a, with a heart and mind of compassion. So then when it comes to handling protesting, we're protesting out of compassion rather than out of anger, which is a huge difference. In Buddhism, when we talk about karma, when we talk about actions, any type of action we do, the important thing is the intention that we bring to the table. So normally, yes, protesting will be fueled with anger because we are very charged up, and that is unwholesome. But if we understand that perhaps, this is, something that the people in front of us aren't, just purely 100% evil beings that came to this world, just for the sake of torturing us and others that we care about, then we can, go there with a mind of compassion, of understanding that we're all trembling here together in samsara, and that, yeah, perhaps we can make a bit of a difference in advocating for others who are perhaps don't have a strong voice in the world, and we have a bit of a more privileged situation where we can speak for others, but out of compassion, not out of anger. So this is what comes to mind for me. I don't know if another venerable is all good. Okay. And Roy says, are there any dog-friendly monasteries in the US, perhaps? For instance, Empty Cloud and short-term residency, perhaps for someone with an emotional support dog asking for a friend? I love the asking for a friend questions. Well, Bhante
I don't know of any monasteries which allow you to bring a dog. Sorry.
And Robert asks, who knew there was a monastery in West Orange? I'll pick this. I'll answer this. I knew. Also, Bhante Siddhasa knew because we started it together, so we knew. We started the Empty Cloud Monastery right before the pandemic, 2 months before the pandemic started. So that's why perhaps the word hasn't spread that much, because we opened and kind of shut down right after. And now slowly reopening. And hello to Kevin, good to see you. And Bettina, maybe I'll pass this on to Bhante Sudaso. Can you elaborate on enlightenment? How, why?
Well, first off, what is enlightenment in Buddhist terms? So this word is used in many different contexts. So it's important to be clear when we talk about enlightenment, we're talking about Buddhist enlightenment. Which is not the same as how this word is used in other traditions or in Western philosophy. So in Buddhism, when we talk about enlightenment, we're talking about the perfection of wisdom, the elimination of all unwholesome tendencies of mind, so eliminating all tendency towards desire and aversion, as well as fear. The elimination of all self-centeredness, so all narcissism, egotism, all of that is completely eliminated. And the attainment of perfect unconditional happiness, unshakable unconditional happiness. So that's the why. Why would you want enlightenment? Because perfect unshakable unconditional happiness. We actually spend our entire life trying to be happy and going about it in the wrong ways. We're constantly pursuing conditional happinesses. So the happiness of eating pizza, and that is a kind of happiness, but it's a very limited, temporary kind of happiness, so it's not reliable. Or the happiness of getting a new car. Again, limited, temporary, conditional happiness, not so great. The happiness of having a nice dog, conditional, temporary, limited happiness, not so great. So ultimately, we're always trying to be happy, but we're trying to get happiness by accumulating objects and possessions and experiences which are not ultimately capable of providing us with perfect happiness. So the point of Buddhist practice, from one perspective, the point of Buddhist practice is learning how to be perfectly happy all the time, no matter what happens. And that's one way of talking about enlightenment. Enlightenment is also a true, direct understanding of the nature of reality. And interestingly enough, these two statements are identical. So attaining unconditional happiness and having a perfect understanding of absolute reality, these are actually exactly the same thing. They're not separable. Also, perfection of wisdom and perfection of compassion, not separate things. It's different ways of talking about the same thing. So the why is pretty straightforward. It's because happiness. The how is a little more complicated, but briefly speaking, the how is the Noble Eightfold Path. So through developing an intellectual understanding of the Buddha's teachings and then applying it through practicing generosity, morality, and meditation. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Bante. And Roy asks, regarding eating meat, I fully understand what the Buddha said. That's great. Good start. Possibly to make sure monastics weren't too deprived due to extra restrictions. But that was at a kinder and gentler time. In our world of factory farming, any thoughts about how we should translate Buddhist guidance regarding kindness to all life in our current context of having the luxury to decide what to eat? Bante Sumita?
I think when it comes to loving kindness, it is for all sentient beings. So we don't restrict them that loving kindness to our own near and dear ones. So we actually generate loving kindness to all sentient beings. Sometimes even the animals, we humans are more prone to show more kindness to maybe like pet dogs or cats or something, not to every other sentient being. So if you start practicing from whichever way you can, I think then you start radiating that loving kindness to all others. That way, I think it's going to be good. And regarding the eating meat thing, in Buddhism, we have something called Tikodika Parisuddhimansa. And if you have seen or heard that somebody has killed something, some animal for you, then it is said you should not use that. That is especially for monks. So the other thing is when it comes to the Sangvara, Indriya Sangvara or Ahara Sangvara or whatever Vinaya that we have, the faculty of how we restrain ourselves from not being greedy, then it's not only the meat but also all the other food too. Let's say as Bante Sudaso said, you really like to have a pizza, and then maybe that's also not so good because it is overly greedy feeling towards that food. And let's say you are really fond of eating some McDonald's or maybe some whatever meat products that we have in the market, so if you are so much into that you are so addicted to that, or then there is a problem. Whether it is chocolate or whether it is any other fruit or any other food or anything, if you are overly addicted to too much greedy, then there is a problem. So we have to be careful about that. So just moderating food is very important. And when the monks chant, they say when they do the reflection of wisely reflecting on the food, they say this food is just for the survival of this body and for good health. And maybe sometime taking some meat products can be toxic and also arouse some unnecessary feelings or emotions, or maybe hyperactivity can be something like that. And therefore especially for those people who are practicing, it's good to have simple food. Simple food makes your life easy, and also the more food, so-called nutritious food that you take, the more toxic it becomes, in fact. So it's better to have less food, simple food, so that it is easier for you to digest, and it's easier for you to practice.
Thank you, Venerable. And hello, Andre, who says, I hope you're all doing good, Venerables. I wish you all to be fully enlightened as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And you as well. And Andre also asks, are monks allowed to go on a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat at one of the Goenka's retreats? Well, since Ajahn, he started in that tradition, maybe I'll pass it on to him.
Yeah. I did start in that tradition, but I haven't yet gone back to sit at a retreat since I've been a monk. So I think it's been almost 20 years since I was doing, almost 20 years since I did my last Vipassana retreat, but it is possible. I mean, that's probably the first time I saw a real live monk, like in person, was actually at one of these Vipassana centers in Shelburne Falls. There was actually 2 or 3 monks who were sitting like longer courses or even a short 10-day. And yeah, I was very happy to see that there were still monks in the world, because that's not something I grew up with. But I think, I think it depends on the individual Goenka center. And I think, we would have to send in a request, and it might just depend on when they had openings and what the assistant teacher, kind of the call they made. Yeah, that's my understanding of things. I know when I have seen the monks there, they do kind of put the monks on like a raised platform, which is they're kind of wanting to show preeminence to monks, but they're also, they're not a monastic tradition. They're very much a lay tradition. And I don't think it's possible, as I've ever heard it in America, for a monk to stay long-term or to live permanently at a Goenka center. I think there have been centers that have tried it, but for the most part, it's a lay tradition. But that said, I'd love to go back and do another retreat. They're amazing. And for people who haven't yet done a Goenka retreat and you think you might be inclined to do it, I highly recommend it, even for monastics, if you can find a way and occasion and they let you do it.
I attended the 10 days retreat when I was in India. Goenka retreat. It was really, really nice. And actually, I was the only monk that time. Yes, as Bhante Kovilo said, I was given a raised platform. And I remember at the end of the retreat, somebody was, because we had to practice noble silence the whole 10 day. And immediately after that retreat was over, somebody came to me. He was from another country, and he asked me the first question, why did you sit on a raised platform? So that was his biggest concern. I think the whole 10 days he was suffering. He was suffering. He wanted to really ask that question. I felt like, oh, this guy was having a hard time concentrating. Every time I sat on the elevated platform, he was not feeling comfortable, maybe. Yes, and I think it is really nice. And all these practices are very helpful. And I also know there are some Buddhist monks who are working as practitioners, plus also volunteer teachers in different Goenka centers. And I remember there was one monk in India, Sri Lankan monk. He was also working as an instructor.
Thank you, Venerables. And Kevin asks, spiritual bypassing. Any comments on how to better see it in one's own practice, and what to do about it? I'll take that one. Yeah, spiritual bypassing. Our good friend, enemy. Well, I would say that to a certain degree, till we are attaining, have a certain level of attainment or development of wisdom, we tend to all resort to spiritual bypassing to a certain degree or the other because we are not fully understanding suffering, both in ourselves. So we see how sometimes we spiritual bypass ourselves, like we're going through suffering and then we, take refuge in the fridge, as Ajahn Pasanta said when he was here. Instead of in the triple gem, we open the fridge and take refuge in all the food there, or take refuge in the TV or whatnot. So we spiritual bypass ourselves. And then when other people around us are going through suffering and they are sharing their suffering, we just can't shut up and listen. We just have to say something. But where is our intention? What is our intention when we are saying something? Like, for example, if someone is experiencing grief and we're like, okay, well, of course, everybody's going to die. So why are you surprised? Duh, didn't you do your contemplation of death? Or if, someone is, just suffering because perhaps someone has said something, not proper to them, not friendly, then we resort to, well, there is no self. So why are you getting wrapped up with yourself? Clearly, it's all about your ego, etc. So why are we saying these things? Is it beneficial? Is it useful? Sometimes we just say, oh, it's your karma or whatever. Is it beneficial? Is it useful? Well, I always go back to the suttas and see actually how the Buddha and how the enlightened beings in the suttas, relate to other people's suffering. And so, for example, when Kisa Gautami goes to the Buddha, full of grief, that her child was dead and she couldn't wrap herself around, the incredible pain that she was going through. It's not that the Buddha spiritually bypassed her and said some, kind of lame thing just to get her to be silent, but rather, every enlightened being or every practitioner with really good wisdom has cultivated an appropriate response, really understands what the person in front of them needs to hear, needs to listen, needs to realize in that moment. So what he does is creates the conditions for her to realize it herself. And he tells her to, go and find a mustard seed for, any family that hadn't experienced death in the family. And so as she goes, finding this mustard seed, with the promise that if she would have brought a mustard seed, her son would have come back from the dead. So by doing that, he created the conditions for her to realize it herself, rather than for him to say, yeah, of course, everybody is going to die, whatever it is, how things are. Or, we see also Angulimala when he goes on alms round and there is that woman in extreme pain, giving birth in extreme pain. And he doesn't say, well, it's your karma. Be there in pain. Clearly you've done something wrong in your past lives. So no, he actually goes there and inspires her with words of wisdom, with words of virtue that elate her mind and relieve her from that suffering. So yeah, checking our intention and what are we doing when we're speaking. And sometimes it's just even difficult to be silent, because when we're silent, then we are experiencing like physically the pain of others. Sometimes that's all we need to do, actually. Sometimes people come, they are not looking for answers, they're not looking for, even a Dhamma talk. They're just looking for someone to just listen, to just be with them. And so that's the practice, of sometimes just shutting up out of compassion, of course, and not spacing out, not thinking, okay, well, I'm what do I have to do tomorrow? When is this thing over? Oh, this person has been talking for 20 minutes already, I gotta go. But rather just being there, deep listening, as Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, actually. And yeah, understanding the First Noble Truth and allowing the person to tremble in this world, just like we need to tremble. And then when the conditions are right, then we can share words of Dhamma. But yeah, cultivating that wisdom, I would say, is definitely part of the practice. And seeing always how does the Buddha and how do the enlightened beings deal with others when they're going through suffering in the suttas is always very inspiring. So this is what comes to mind. I don't know if the other venerables have any other thoughts.
I would just add one brief comment to this. So it's also important. So when people talk about spiritual bypassing, they sometimes use that as a way of bypassing spirituality. So saying like, oh, don't spiritual bypass me with your talk about equanimity and patience. But actually sometimes exactly what they're doing is they're trying to avoid practicing the Dhamma. So they're just throwing on the term spiritual bypassing because they're trying to avoid the Dhamma. So that's also something that we need to watch out for. Because the Dhamma actually does have the answer to our dukkha and how to overcome our dukkha. So sometimes people say things like, oh, well, we should pay attention to this modern cultural theory or that modern philosophical concept or this thing from modern psychology, and that's much more important. But actually, it's not. It's not. Those are just ways that people try to bypass the Dhamma. So always coming back to the Dhamma as foremost, as number one. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
And Giancarlo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, maybe just a quick practical note. I mean, yeah, it is possible if one is practicing by oneself and doesn't have like a group of kalyanamitta, of good spiritual friends, to just think that you are somewhere in your practice that you're not. So this is very common at monasteries in America, where people are very new to Buddhism. They've sat one or two, retreats, and they feel like there may be some level of enlightenment. And yeah, but when you come into a community, you really, like, when you live with people, that's when you get to see your all sorts of mental hang-ups, and it's much less easy to spiritually bypass in a mature spiritual community. If you're an immature spiritual community or like a cult-like place, then the whole community can be spiritually bypassing, like as a group phenomenon. But if you're in a trustworthy community where you've got a good teacher who's really grounded in Dhamma, they can be a mirror for you, and you will start to see that when you start exerting your awakening onto the community, there's a dissonance, and you can if you're you haven't totally put blinders on your capacity to know reality, then you'll start to notice that the people around you are starting to feel like you're a little bit off, if you are bypassing in this way. So
Great, thank you. And Aaron says, I've heard of Devas being present for Dhamma teachings or other human events. Do Devas enter the human realm in these circumstances? Does the Deva realm function in time and space like our realm? Bhante Sudaso?
I actually think Bhante Sumita would be a better one for this one.
Sumita. I just had passed it to you because I know you're fond of Devas, but
I think Buddha has met so many Devas in his lifetime, including the first Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta itself. There were so many Devas present and so many Brahmas present. So divine beings have the capacity to also traverse around. And they can actually, when they come to the human realm, they would not come with all those mighty, powers that they have there, they would rather transform themselves into simple human-like form sometimes, and it is said they would come. And in Vimanavatthu also it is mentioned like that. And plus many suttas are there. Mahamangala Sutta, there it is said, Deva me sutang ekang samayam bhagava savatyang viharati jetavane anatha pindika sarame athako anyatara devata. Then it says, kevala kappan jetavanang ubhasetva yena bhagavate enupasankami. Like, so they say those devas would come illuminating the entire Jetavana Monastery. I think Jetavana Monastery was having always that, what do you call, lights all the time in the night time. And it's like here, maybe some festival. If someone sees it from the outside, oh, Jetavana Monastery is having some festival or something, because nighttime it was very much radiant with the lights of those devas. And also it is said Devas would come in the night to discuss with the Buddha. So there have been many occasions, not one, so many occasions in Samyutta Nikaya Sagatavagga, completely dedicated to most of the Devas' encounters with the Buddha and the monks. So there have been many occasions where they would come and listen to the Dhamma.
Thank you, Bhante. And Roy, Bhante Sudhasu can pick this up. Following up on the previous question on Goenka retreats, do you perhaps use the same method or something similar within your arsenal?
So I did go on a Goenka retreat a few years ago, so I'm quite familiar with the method that they use. And I have to say, I was actually quite amused with all the secrecy that they put around their method, to find out that it's actually just a perfectly ordinary meditation technique that's pervasive throughout the Buddhist world. So although they tell you not to reveal their method, I'm not revealing the Goenka method. I'm just revealing the standard body scanning method that the entire Buddhist world already has. So I'm not breaking any confidentiality here. So there is a practice that is common in the Theravada world of scanning your attention through the body, piece by piece, and perceiving the body as impermanent, and also looking to see if you have any desire or aversion response to any sensations that are appearing. And if you do, to practice equanimity instead. So this is a practice of mindfulness of the body, perception of impermanence, and equanimity, which are all quite standard Buddhist meditation practices. And it's contained within a method of slowly moving your attention through the body piece by piece, so body scanning. So I don't personally like to move attention through the body. I like to encompass the whole body as a single unmoving object. But otherwise, the practices of perceiving impermanence and practicing equanimity toward sensation, those are techniques that I personally use very frequently. They're very helpful. They're techniques that the Buddha spoke about very often in the suttas. The first 3 days, they talk about a certain way of doing breath meditation, which I actually don't like and I don't use personally. But yeah, I mean, the Goenka methods, the Goenka meditation methods are, yeah, I mean, they're just standard Theravada meditation techniques, which people may or may not use. So my preceptor, Ajahn Pasano, he just said, do whatever works. So if the Goenka methods work for you, that's great. If other methods work for you, well, then use other methods. If many methods work for you, well, then you have many methods to use. That's great. Yeah, so you're not stuck on using any one specific method. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. And I think Homo has a follow-up question for Bhante Sumita. Looks like Devas in the Buddha's teachings and angels in other faiths are similar. The fact that some can detect their presence is also not a surprise anymore. Are they both in the Kamaloka?
Yeah, I don't know about the other faith, how they interpret the Devas, but I think according to Buddhism, they are of course a part of Kamaloka. There are 11 Kamalokas, human world, and then 4 Apaya realms, and then the 6 Deva worlds. They are all part of these Kamalokas. 11 Kama worlds are there. Yeah, I hope they are all good beings. They are all powerful beings, even in the other religions. But I don't know. Maybe their interpretation towards those divine beings are different. This is my understanding. In Buddhism, they are karmic devas. They are not there forever, and those devas can come back, and as they can be humans, and maybe if they do something bad, they can also be born as an animal, or this will go on until you attain the nibbana. So devas are not permanent beings. This is very important. Although their lifespan is much longer than the humans.
Thank you, Venerable. And Lucas says, how do Venerable see the pursuit of enlightenment as the right approach? I observe the practice of the Dhamma being presented in the Western world in a laid-back sort of way, doing what you can. Whereas in traditions like the Tibetan, monks like Milarepa emphasize a sense of urgency for Nibbana at every step. Well, what comes to mind actually as I read this question is when so we used to run a retreat center in New York City, and at a certain point Bhante Sujato came, and I think someone asked him, so Bhante Sujato spent many years in Thailand, training in Thailand, and someone asked him about, how and why it was so hardcore, to train in Thailand, and and he was like, yeah, you read these books and like you hear like, wow, these like Thai masters are so harsh, and like, whoa, and the Thai people are really intense practitioners, like really hardcore. Look at these Dhamma talks, like there's no room for error, no room for anything. But here, I'm here in New York City, and what kind of teachings that I'm giving you? Just relax. There's like, all the time in the world. And then he asked the question. So, someone who would read, like my Dhamma talks and would have this idea of New Yorkers being all relaxed, being very calm, very sweet, So perhaps the Dhamma talks, or the sort of the Dhamma, is not necessarily reflective of the people, but rather it's reflective of what does the audience need to hear. And so he was explaining how, the Thai people, or the Thai monks that he was training with, they are very full of metta, so like if they were left, to their own devices, they would just be, all blissed out all the time doing metta meditation. So they need some kind of really like strong words from the teacher in order to arise right effort. But people in America, I would say, because when in the West, normally whenever people say in the West, in reality they say in America, but in Europe it would be very different according to the different countries. So I will rephrase, in the US, especially in places like New York City, people are very, they push themselves to the edge. So then, a different approach, a little bit more laid back, can make more sense. Another thing that comes to mind is actually the instructions that Ajahn Chah would give to his disciples. And at a certain point, someone asked him, Ajahn Chah, you just give like opposite directions all the time. We're so confused. And he's like, well, if you're driving your car and you're trying to go straight, if you go to the left, I will tell you to go right. I'll go right, go right. And if you go too much to the right, then I will say, go left, go left. So it sounds like the directions are the opposite, but really in reality, they're only trying to get you to be in the middle. So yeah, see for yourself what are your conditions of mind and what do you need. Do you need to push yourself more, or do you need to just chill a little bit, just relax? Bhante Sudhas a lot of times tells me, just relax.
That's because she needs to relax.
Yeah, actually it used to irritate the hell out of me, but then I relaxed. And it worked. So thank you, Bhante. And then good to see you all. Johnny, Angela, Sharav Label. And Johnny asks, I'll pass it on to John Fabio. Bhante, when you see gross stuff on your tissue after you blow your nose, do you contemplate on the mucus on the tissue being the same as your body?
Yes. Sometimes, maybe. Yeah, I mean, there's a movie called Fear of a Black Hat, which is a parody of rap music in the early 90s. And there was a whole song about this subject. And one of the lyrics was, when you wipe, do you look at the tissue? Most folks do. It ain't even an issue. So
Nice.
yeah. And so yeah, but I know monks who do collect like body parts, like, not necessarily like mucus, but yeah, like little. I have one monk friend who has like little plastic containers of like other people's hair. You know, I gave him a couple teeth one time that I had a couple teeth pulled, and he kept them for a couple years, and they tried to give them back. And it's like, you know, and so I put him in the library. But yeah, and he had all sorts of little, the gross stuff he was collecting was, it was gross, but yeah, I mean, different people like different ways of practice, and so this is pointing to, so for people who are just like, what are they talking about? Like, what is all this, looking at the gross stuff? And there is an aspect of Buddhism called Subha Bhavana, or Subha meditation. Subha means beautiful. Is a negating prefix, so that which is not beautiful, the kind of gross or repulsive aspects of the body. And it can be really useful because oftentimes we're just so infatuated, and all we see is the sign of the beautiful, whether it's in ourselves or in other people. And we need to be careful and be able to see the body in its totality. And there's a traditional list of 32 parts of the body: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, bones, bone marrow, etc. It's good to give attention to all these things, because for the most part we just pay attention to those first 5: the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. That's what we see when we look at someone else. But there's all sorts of all these gross fluids and semi-solids, like just underneath the skin. And when you pay attention to those, it shifts your perspective. You can be totally, only paying attention to a small fraction of reality in your interactions with other people. And if you're being drawn in the direction of lust in an unhelpful way, then just go, maybe inch or two into their skin in your imagination. And it gets nasty pretty quick. So if it works for you, please look at all your wipings.
Thank you, Venerable. And Pial and Indira Walpala ask, dependent origination. Good start. Some sutta cite different starting points. However, the common starting point is ignorance causing volitional formations, etc., according to the 12-step classic descriptions of dependent origination. However, when we interact with the world, our 6 senses are the obvious starting point, or so-called the all as cited in sutta texts. Does in reality volition or thought process come first, even before the sensory bases begin to function? Maybe this is in science what we call the predictive second. Oh, I'm missing your second part of the question, so we'll address that. Maybe I'll pass it on to Suita.
When it comes to dependent origination, it's actually a circle. So we can really say what is first. Even though you say, okay, 6 senses are the first, but before you see something, you also, in your mind, that different connections are there. So it's difficult to say which one is first. It can be interconnected though. Like avidya pachya sankhara, because of ignorance, it is said you do this, accumulate the karma, and then sankhara pachya vijnana, and then you have the karmic vijnana, and then the existence, and then 6 sense bases, and then the contact, and then the feelings, and all these things can go together. The most important thing is, I think, this during this 12 links, some of those links are very stronger, relatively stronger than the other. For example, the avijja and tanha, they are much stronger than the other. So but whatever it is, dependent origination means they are interdependent. They are depending on each other, and our past karma helps us to sustain here in this world, this existence, and then whatever we do here will be instrumental in sustaining in our future. And the most important thing for Boris to think that we have the authority to control whatever we have. It's really an amazing privilege that we have. You are not depending on any unseen force or something. You are responsible for your own actions. So you have the capacity also to take care of your own action. If you want to become a Buddha, you have the authority to do so. If you want to become an Arahant, you can do so too. So you are very, very, you have that, you are endowed with that authority. I think that is also very important. Although looking at these things, these are definitely talking about our existence in the samsara, but then again through these factors, if we go through these, and eventually if we can seize one by one, nirodha, avijja nirodho, avijja nirodha sankhara nirodho. So the other way around also is happening. That is, I think, is the real beauty of this teaching, and one of the most powerful and very scientific, very modern way of teaching. I really highly recommend we all should learn more about this, and that way our understanding, our comprehensive understanding of the Dhamma will be much more wider.
Thank you, Bante. And Rick asks, Venerable, at what stage of practice is it wise to focus more on inner cultivation? And at what stage is it wise to focus more on sharing the fruits of practice with others?
Well, ultimately, it depends upon what's helpful. I also don't necessarily see this as a duality, by the way. One thing that I find really helpful is the simile of the acrobats, which is a short sutta where it ends with the Buddha saying, when you look after yourself, you look after others. When you look after others, you look after yourself. So in this, the Buddha is pointing out that you can't really divide the two apart. When you're developing your own purity of heart, your own goodness, your own wisdom, then that naturally means that you'll be more helpful to other people. And also, when you make an effort to practice compassion and to help other people, then that is also training and developing your own mind and purifying your own heart. So the point of that sutta is that we create this dichotomy between purifying our own heart and helping other people as though they were two separate things, but they're not two separate things. It's just one practice of Dhamma. So that said, if you're spending like every single waking moment volunteering at nonprofit organizations and not doing any study and any meditation, well, that's actually not so great. You might just be developing agitation. But maybe not. Look at your mind. If your practice is already well advanced, then sometimes actually doing a bunch of compassionate service with mindfulness and goodwill, sometimes that's actually really beneficial. Similarly, sometimes what you actually need is to do a bunch of formal meditation and study all the time. But then other times you find that if you're just meditating all day long and not doing anything else, that the mind starts to become very dull and depressed. And then when you incorporate a little bit of service to others into your day, then that brightens up the mind again. So ultimately, it's a matter of looking at the results, of constantly reflecting upon what we're doing and how it's affecting our mind. Another thing I would point out, by the way, is that to keep in mind that ultimately all Buddhist practice is for the elimination of self-obsession. All Buddhist practice is about eliminating our self-centeredness, eliminating our self-obsessiveness. So practicing insight meditation is one way of doing that. But performing kind, generous, thoughtful, compassionate acts for other people also can be a way of eroding our self-attachment, our self-identity. And often what's really beneficial is to have a mixture of private contemplative practices and compassionate service to others. So some mixture of them. And that mixture, like what mixture is helpful to you, will vary from day to day, month to month, year to year. So you have to keep looking at the results and keep experimenting.
Thank you, Bante. And Gracie asks, do you guys practice the jhanas? How did you learn them, if so? Ajahn Kalila?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Bhante Siddhasa and Bhante Sumita, and maybe I some as well. Like, I mean, teach the jhanas. There is a bit of a trickiness when, like, for monks, we've got 4 rules. We've got 227 main ones, but we got just tons and tons of rules. We got so many rules. But there are 4 main ones which we really have to pay attention to. If we do these rules, then we're automatically no longer monks. And the first one is if we have sex. Second one is if we steal a certain amount in a certain way. If we kill a human being. And then the fourth one, which is relevant here, is making a claim to a superhuman or spiritual state, which includes jhana. So if it's a lie, if you lie about a spiritual attainment. So yeah, in the tradition that I'm kind of grew up in the Thai forest tradition, there's really, say, Tanpa Phuang would really encourage people. He himself wouldn't talk about the jhanas and wouldn't enumerate the different numbers, but would just talk about the faculties of mind. You've got directedness of mind, you've got evaluation of that, you've got blissful states of mind, pleasure, one-pointedness. He would talk about the states, but certainly wouldn't talk about them being present in himself, and also wouldn't talk about, just in general, avoid the way of counting, because in my experience, different meditation centers, different teachers talk about the jhanas in different ways, and it can be unhelpful to kind of, slap a label onto your mental experience, because the mental landscape changes, and you might find that next week what you thought was jhana wasn't jhana. So yeah, that's the general way that I talk about jhana. And yeah, internally, I personally just try to cultivate all those jhana factors. Yeah, directedness of mind, and yeah, it's they're the same factors of mind that you're practicing, up to the first jhana. So yeah, everybody who's meditating, unless you're going from the first jhana to the second jhana or subsequent jhanas, basically all of us want to be practicing a singleness of mind. We want to be cultivating, inclining in a direction towards like a happiness of mind, sukha, towards sukha, or even pleasure of mind, towards rapture, and towards using if you're going to use the thinking faculty, be very specific in directing it towards your meditation topic. So I think that was the first aspect, was that do we practice it, and then the second.
How do you learn them, if so?
Yeah, maybe one of the others who actually teach it on a regular basis.
Bhante Subbaso is an expert in the subject, I guess.
I don't pretend to be an expert, but actually I would say they're not complicated to learn. They're complicated to practice, but only because we live complicated lives. If you live a simple life with a simple mind and you focus on your meditation object, then you will enter jhana. It's really as simple as that. It only seems complicated because we're addicted to music, and we're addicted to movies, we're addicted to gossiping. Not me, but like people in general. People in general tend to be addicted to music and movies and gossiping and all kinds of unnecessary busyness of body and mind. And that's why jhana seems difficult. But actually, it's not difficult. So as for how you learn, well, actually, it's all in the Buddhist teachings. These, again, they're not complicated. Just put your mind on your meditation object and keep it there. That's really it. And it's not like learning rocket science.
All right, thank you, Venerables. And hello to Sam Nang, who is watching from Cambodia.
Oh.
And who also suggests the camera director should do a close-up on the speaker. Well, all the residents here are laughing because the camera director does not exist. We have a bit of a medieval setup. But sometime when you come and visit us here in West Orange, New Jersey, you're hired to be the camera director. The pay is the equal pay. Here we have all equal pay at Empty Cloud, which is 0. But there's definitely the job description of camera director now. It's yeah, we can do it. And Danilo says, I was having a lot of pain with my meditations, and now I understand why. I have been undiagnosed with asthma for a long time. Going to check in with my doctor to get further tests. For now, I'm going to take a break from meditation intensive tasks. What merit could I make in the meantime? Well, I've got some really good news for you, because the Buddha didn't teach the Noble Twofold Path, but he taught the Noble Eightfold Path. So you can actually focus on the rest of the paths. You don't have to just practice intensive meditation, but yeah, like offer food to your temple close by. Delight the mind with cultivating generosity. Cultivate that beautiful ornament of mind, of having a mind of virtue. Cultivate compassion. Cultivate kindness. Yeah, you have like a whole field of opportunities to work on. Yeah, cultivate right livelihood, right speech. Yeah, all sorts of things that you can do. So you're gonna be okay, and then that will help you would support you with your meditation practice when you feel more comfortable after your doctor sees what the situation is like. And Kumo asks, and I'll pass this on to Bhante Sumita, what is Kammasakata Sammaditi? Heard it in a Dhamma talk. Wasn't clear whether it was having the right view about wholesome and unwholesome deeds or something totally different.
Kammasakata Sammaditi. Sorry, I'm not really. I didn't read it for a while about that particular Sammaditi. But does anyone of you want to comment on that?
I'm not familiar with this particular term. I mean, I know what the Pali words mean, but I'm not familiar with this technical term. So I would
I
just
read it some time back, but I don't remember right now.
yeah. If maybe Kumo, if you can send us a reference, then we'll get back to you next time.
Right, and Paul says, sorry if this question is off topic. Well, there's no topic tonight, so it should be all right. But how does one deal with difficult or painful memories that arise, whether during meditation or in everyday life? Who did I
think it's Kovilo's turn.
Ajahn Kavilo?
How do I deal with
Difficult or
situation?
painful memories that arise, whether during meditation or in everyday life?
Yeah, one benefit of meditation is that we're practicing how to direct the mind, and basically you can think of meditation as the art of choice. We're exercising the choice muscle of our minds, and doing it in a very intentional and it's like the meditation hall is like the laboratory that we're practicing in, and the more you practice on bringing your mind back to a particular object, then the stronger your capacity for doing that in daily life as well. So if to some extent you can, in certain situations, bring your mind back to a meditation object or just to something more wholesome. There's a sutta called the Vitakka Santana Sutta. I think it's Majjhima number 20, in which the Buddha gave 5 different methods for dealing with or calming thoughts. And there's a fun acronym which is related to this, and that is SLIDE. So when those bad memories come up, you can just slide into more wholesome states of mind. So that's SLIDE, and that S is for substitution. So the memory comes up of whatever bad experience we've had, whatever traumatic experience we've had, and you can just substitute that for a more wholesome or less traumatic or even beneficial memory. One recommendation from Ajahn Jayasaro, one of my main teachers, is readily on mind have the 10 best things that you've done in life ready at the forefront of your mind, so you can always bring those to mind. So I did XYZ. So this is a task for everybody, is just consciously give some time to thinking about what are the 10 most wholesome things you've done in your life. So those can be substitution pegs. So the simile is, you've got this wall and it's got various holes in them, and they're like corks in the hole. And one way to get the cork out of the hole in the wall is to take another cork and then bang out that other cork with this new cork. So that's the substitution method. The L of the sliding away from these bad memories is to lull. So you lull your mind into basically a more relaxed state. So the simile with that is, you have someone walking along and they think, why am I walking along? I'm restless. Why don't I sit down? And they sit down and say, why am I sitting down when I could lie down? And the person who's lying down is basically in a more relaxed posture. So this is basically dealing with unhelpful, unwanted thoughts through just relaxing, and you can actually relax the body. Don't look down on lying down meditation. It's a fully valid way of dealing with your mind. When the body is more calm, when you've got more surface area of this 5 to 6 foot tall frame on the ground, gravity is doing all the work that your muscles don't have to do, and the mind can relax because there's less effort being put into the posture. The I of the slide is to ignore. So these thoughts keep coming up, but those bad thoughts are just like good thoughts, or just like everything else in the world, is they arise and they pass away. And if you just don't give any attention to them, then they pass away. One modern treatment for post-traumatic stress syndrome is playing Tetris. Yeah. So if you've had a traumatic event and within 24 hours you play a bunch of Tetris, then the instance of that, going from one traumatic event to being an event which you keep reliving over an extended period of time is lessened. It's basically you're just practicing ignoring something. So that's a valid method, the Buddha said. So it's basically just like, rather than looking at something, you choose, I'm just not going to look at that. It's the mental equivalent, that mental shift. The D is to look at the drawbacks of whatever it is. If I paid attention to this bad thought, then it would take me down a bad road, and I just become more frightened. So if you can intellectually pay attention to the drawbacks. And the E is to eliminate. So basically, this is the simile for this is just as a big person would take a small person. I forget. You take the small person by the shoulders, or it's basically like, big, like bouncer, like lifting up the little tiny guy who's causing trouble in his bar and literally picking up and taking him somewhere else. And this is the sledgehammer technique of mind, where you basically put the tongue up against the roof of the mouth and you say, I'm just not going to think that. I'm just not going to think that. And one way which can help for that is mantra. So basically just Buddha, 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 Buddha. I'm not going to pay attention to that. So yeah, you got 3 methods plus 2.
Great, thank you, Venerable. And the next question, Bhante Sumita, is there anything in the Dhamma canons of Theravada and Mahayana that would conflict with each other?
I think one of the main teachings that we conflict with each other is, in Theravada we say we can attain Nibbana by way of becoming Buddha, or becoming Pacceka Buddha, or becoming Arahanta. So we have 3 doors to attain Nibbana. But in Mahayana, I think they are only focusing on Buddhahood, or the enlightenment, the supremely enlightened being. And Bodhisattva concept also is very highly promoted in Mahayana tradition. Whereas in Theravada, we also do have Bodhisattva concept. Like, prior to achieving the enlightenment, you are a Bodhisattva. So in Mahayana, I think it is slightly different. And there can be many other schools of Mahayana. So there are differences even in practice. And but we also do agree with certain things like karma, dependent origination, Four Noble Truths, and impermanence. There are some the loving kindness. They are some of the main teachings that we all agree upon.
Thank you, Venerable. And Kumo is following up on the question from earlier. She says it was from a talk by Ellawala Vijitananda Theron. I think he mentions it in his book as well. Not too sure about later. Later. No, rings a bell. No bell. No bell was wrong. Oh, good to see you, James. So thank you all for doing these Q&As. Well, and thank you for asking questions. There wouldn't be any mock chat without questions. So that was the last question, unless we have something from the live audience. Nope. So that is all for tonight. So we can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
May all beings attain awakening. See you next week online or this weekend at Empty Cloud Monastery. Once again, tomorrow, Bhante Sumita will be leading a walk in the nature reserve close by. And on Sunday, we'll have a volunteer day here at the monastery. So hope to see you all soon. May you be well and happy.